Hello and welcome to episode 8 of Courtside. I'm your host, Andrew Cohen. Courtside is a podcast dedicated to all things sports. In today's episode, I will discuss things that don't make sense, make my Week 5 NFL game picks, and debut sports theory. So sit back, relax, and take a seat. Courtside. So I've been thinking a lot recently about the Courtside podcast and what I want to get out of it, but more about what I want you guys to get out of it. Of course, I find it fun to share my sports thoughts with you guys, but there's nothing that necessarily makes my thoughts different from anyone else's. That is why, from here on out, I want to distinguish this podcast and make it the best it can possibly be. So over the next couple episodes, I will be experimenting with a bunch of different exercises. So make sure to give me feedback on them. One way I'm going to try to make my podcast the best it can possibly be is to begin a new segment this week called Things That Don't Make Sense. In this segment, I will literally go over things that just don't make any sense. Some may be sports related, some may not. I will give you a heads up and say that this week it is all sports, but in the future, be ready for some non-sports stuff. Without further ado, let's get started. One thing that makes just no sense is the MLB playoff seeding. I will talk more about the MLB playoffs later, but I do want to talk about how the MLB playoffs, the seeding just makes no sense. The Red Sox, the first seed in the American League, have to play the Yankees, the fourth seed in the ALDS. Makes sense. However, the Yankees have the third best record in the American League postseason picture, and based on record, the Red Sox should be playing the Indians, and the Yankees should be playing the Astros. Now listen, maybe I just feel this way because I'd rather see a 7-game ALCS between the Yankees and Red Sox instead of a 5-game ALDS, but I do think it's a problem that the second best American League team has an easier division series matchup than the best team. The National League also has a similar problem. The Brewers, who hold the best record in the National League, they have to play the Rockies, who have the third best record. The Dodgers, on the other hand, with the team with the second best record in the National League playoff picture, they get to play the Braves, who have the worst record in the National League postseason picture. This is the exact same situation as the American League. Even worse, had the Cubs defeated the Rockies in the wildcard game, the Brewers and Cubs would have played each other, meaning the top two teams, record-wise, would match up, and the bottom two teams would match up. That's a problem for the MLB, and they need to come up with a way to fix it before it's too late. Alright, something else that just makes no sense to me is that some people still think Kyrie Irving is going to lead the Celtics. Now, up until recently, I was also of the belief that there was a decent chance that Kyrie Irving would leave the Celtics in 2019 free agency. I heard rumors about him wanting to play for the Knicks, or play with Jimmy Butler, or both, and I bought into the idea that maybe Kyrie didn't want to play for the Celtics long term. However, any concerns I had about him leaving, they were calmed this past week. First of all, the Celtics had open practice, and he told all the fans in the crowd that he planned on re-signing in Boston. That doesn't mean too much, but the big thing for me was that he invited all of his teammates to his house and told them in person that he plans on re-signing with Boston long term. Now, for those of you out there that still don't believe Kyrie is going to re-sign with the Celtics, let me try to convince you otherwise. Let's take the case of Kevin Durant, another superstar whose pending free agency was a huge topic of conversation at the time. He never told any of his coaches or any of his teammates that he planned on returning to OKC. In fact, he denied every report that came out that said he was going to tell his teammates he would re-sign. Whenever asked about his upcoming free agency in 2014, he always said he was just focused on the current season and he didn't want to think about his free agency. If Kyrie were to leave now, just about everyone in the NBA, players, coaches, front office members, fans, none of them would like Irving. And no matter what some might say, people do care about how others perceive him. Okay, and it's time to move into my NFL Week 5 game picks, a staple of the Courtside podcast for the past few episodes. Now, I did not record an episode of the Courtside podcast each of the last 2 weeks, but I did post my picks on Twitter. If you have not checked out the official Courtside Twitter page, it is at the Courtside Pod, and you should go check it out right now. I will also link the Twitter page in the podcast description. But anyways, I'm currently 36-28 on the season after a big bounce back week in my picks for Week 4. Here are my Week 5 picks. Alright, let's start with the Titans versus the Bills. The Bills just are not a good team. Against the Packers, I think they proved that their Week 3 win over the Vikings was a fluke. Whereas the Titans, on the other hand, they just continue to prove that they are good at winning games. I mean, they haven't necessarily played well. They haven't necessarily deserved to win these games, but they are winning. And I think the Titans will find another way to win this week's game against the Bills. All right, Falcons versus Steelers. This one's a really interesting matchup. I'm pretty excited to watch this game. I mean, the Falcons have been unbelievable offensively the last 2 weeks. Yet the injury-depleted defense has found a way to allow 80 combined points over the last 2 games, and has caused the Falcons to lose both contests. The Steelers have also been terrible on defense, with their offense trying to carry the team to wins. I think the Falcons win this one in a shootout. All right, next up we have the Broncos versus the Jets. The Jets have looked pretty bad since their Week 1 obliteration of the Lions. I mean, there's really no other way to say it. Now for the Broncos, Case Keenum continues to let down their offense, and Denver has lost 2 straight after beginning 2-0. Both teams are trending downwards, but I think the Broncos, behind a strong rushing attack from Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman, will find a way to get the win. All right, Jaguars versus Chiefs. Now this is going to be an interesting matchup. Patrick Mahomes is definitely the MVP of the NFL after the first quarter of the season, but he faces his biggest test this weekend against the Jaguars. The Jaguars' defense has allowed a total of 56 points over the first 4 weeks, which is tops among the NFL teams that have at least played 4 games. Jacksonville's defense has been tough so far, and I don't envision that changing, especially with thunderstorms and heavy rain this game. I like the Jaguars in this one. All right, next up we have the Packers versus the Lions. The Lions have looked much better since they started giving the ball to Kerryon Johnson, and they've proved to me at least that they can win football games. The Packers have not looked too good this season, at least so far, and they're really banged up, especially at the wide receiver position heading into this one. I'm taking the Lions. Okay, next up we have the Ravens versus the Browns. Listen, ever since Baker Mayfield took over, the Browns have just been a completely different team throughout the, offensively and defensively. They're moving the ball down the field, and then despite giving up a ton of points to the Raiders, Cleveland's defense has looked pretty strong. However, the Ravens have proven themselves to be a tough defensive team, and I think the Ravens should go into Cleveland and will beat the Browns in this one. All right, next up we have the Giants versus the Panthers. The Giants have not looked good on offense, and they have not proven that they can play defensively. Carolina's coming off their bye week, and they should be fresh. And also, because they're coming off the bye week, they've had plenty of time to prepare for this matchup. I'm taking the Panthers. All right, Dolphins versus Bengals. The Bengals are looking really good so far this year, and they're 3-1. The Dolphins are also 3-1, but they're coming off a complete whooping by the New England Patriots. Cincinnati is trending upwards. Dolphins are trending downwards. I like the Bengals in this one. All right, so the Raiders versus the Chargers. The Raiders finally picked up their first win of the year last week, but had the refs not called back Carlos Hyde's game-clinching first down, which definitely was a first down, by the way, Oakland would be 0-4. LA is still without Joey Bosa, at least in my opinion, their best defensive player, but I think the Chargers should win this one at home. All right, Cardinals versus 49ers. This is just a crapshoot. This is the worst matchup of the week. The Cardinals finally started Josh Rosen last week, and they still lost. They were in position to win the game, but they still lost. The 49ers, on the other hand, they played their first game without Jimmy Garoppolo this year, and they also lost to the Chargers. However, the 49ers defense did actually have a couple nice plays, including a pick six, and they were able to move the ball on offense. That can't necessarily be said for the Cardinals. For that reason, I expect the 49ers to win this one. All right, Vikings versus Eagles. Now, I don't usually say there are must-win games in the NFL until the very end of the year. This could be a must-win game for both teams. The Eagles lost a tough game last week to the Titans. However, they were in position to win the game on multiple occasions. With Carson Wentz back and looking pretty solid, the Eagles had the chance to win any game. On the other side, the Vikings defense has not looked like the league's best defense that it was last year. However, they are, in my opinion at least, a better team than the Eagles, so I'm going to go with Minnesota in this one. All right, Rams versus Seahawks. The Rams they look unstoppable right now. They move down the field in just about every drive, and they have made a ton of great defensive plays. The Seahawks have looked okay, but barely escaped with a win last week against Arizona, arguably the worst team in the NFL. I have the Rams winning this one pretty easily. All right, Cowboys versus Texans. I don't really know what to think about the Cowboys. One week they look terrible, then the next week they look great. For the Texans, I think they're on a steady upward trend, and I think they beat Dallas this week. All right, final game of the Sunday Night Football, Redskins versus Saints. The Saints finally had a good game on defense last week against the Giants after just 3 terrible games on the defensive side of the ball to begin the year. For the Redskins, their offense depends on Adrian Peterson and Chris Thompson, as I predicted at the beginning of the year, like it would. The teams that have beaten the Saints are the ones that have effectively thrown the ball down the field, and unfortunately for Washington, they don't do that, so give me New Orleans. All right, now we're going to predict Thursday Night Football for Week 6, and we have the Eagles and the Giants. Now, as I mentioned before, the Giants have not proven themselves on offense or defense. I expect Carson Wentz and the Eagles to go into MetLife Stadium, stop the Giants on defense, as well as drive up and down the field on offense. I like Philly on Thursday. So continuing the idea of distinguishing this podcast and making it the best it can possibly be, I want to debut a new segment this week called Sports Theory. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. In Sports Theory, I basically just go over a big topic around sports that really cannot be talked about or analyzed in just one simple take. For example, this week I'm going to talk about parity in sports, and specifically the NBA. Of course, I could just give a simple take on the subject, but I think talking about it in Sports Theory and giving it much more depth should make it much more interesting, so let's get started. The NBA is rapidly growing, and some, including myself, believe it will be the most popular professional sports league in America sooner rather than later. The NFL is currently the most popular professional sports league in America, but with questions about brain injuries related to football, the sport is experiencing a decline in popularity, as well as a decline in the number of youth players. With basketball trending upwards and football trending downwards, it appears that the NBA will become the most popular American sports league at some point. If the NBA truly wants to take over number one, however, there is one great challenge that it will face. That challenge is to create more parity within the league. We have seen the same NBA Finals matchup for the last 4 seasons. The Golden State Warriors are just so good that many basketball fans are not even watching as many regular season games because it is so easy to predict the result of the playoffs at the beginning of the year. The lack of parity in the NBA is a big problem. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of you listening right now that disagree with my argument that the NBA's lack of parity is bad for the game. And I'm sure if you are one of those people, you'll cite the NBA Finals television ratings to back up your claim. The NBA Finals viewership just really doesn't mean anything, though. Just about everyone I know watches the Super Bowl, whether they are a diehard football fan or the exact opposite. I know some people that will watch even a bit of the World Series, even if they find baseball boring most of the time. And I don't really watch too much hockey, but I'll occasionally watch a Bruins playoff game or even a game of the NHL Finals. My point is, it's not about how many people watch it, it's about how good the product is. And the overall product of the NBA is just not as enjoyable when you know who's going to win the finals every year. Now let's take a quick look at parity in the NFL. The Patriots are the greatest dynasty in NFL history, and they also have, at least in my opinion, and the opinion of many others, the best quarterback in NFL history. New England has been to 8 of the last 17 Super Bowls, and they have won 5 of them. They have also been to 7 straight AFC Championship games, and have won 4 of them. They've lost 3 times in the Super Bowl, though, and they've lost many times in the AFC Championship. They are a beatable team. Additionally, every Super Bowl they have been in has been decided by 8 points or less, and each of their first 3 Super Bowls were decided by a field goal. Every Super Bowl they are in is close and competitive, which is really good for the sport. The Warriors have won each of the last 2 NBA Finals. They won 4-1 2 years ago and 4-0 last year. Those series, they were just never in question. Every smart NBA fan knew that the Warriors were going to destroy LeBron and the Cavaliers heading into the playoffs, and even honestly heading into the NBA regular season. Now let's look at parity in the MLB. How about we look at the postseason specifically? It starts off with the 2 wildcard games, which are both awesome to watch. The games are always highly competitive, suspenseful, and usually come down to the wire. Then there are those division series, where no team is ever out of it, even if they're down 2-0. And then the championship series, which always produce plenty of games that are entertaining and competitive. And then finally, of course, you have the World Series, where every game is close and it never feels like any team is out of any given game. And just look back at the last World Series between the Dodgers and the Astros. Every game was so entertaining, especially to any baseball fan, and even to the casual baseball fan. The MLB and NFL playoffs are great because nobody knows who's going to win at the start of them. Sure, in the NFL, you could choose the Patriots and be right plenty of times, but you would actually be wrong more than you would be right. In baseball, the Red Sox won 108 games this regular season, but all of that goes out the window in the postseason. They could lose to the Yankees in the ALDS and just be out. Baseball's, quote, best team could be out after the first round. In the NBA, there's no chance that the Warriors would lose in the first round. Are you kidding me? However, too much parity is bad as well. In March Madness, the Division I college basketball tournament, every game is an elimination game. This makes every game exciting and important, and any team can win any game because all they have to do is outplay an opponent for 40 minutes. This is great for college basketball and produces the most entertaining playoffs out of all sports, collegiate and professional. I don't think the NBA needs to go that far, but imagine if we went into every playoff series with some hope that the lower seed could win. The 7-game series rarely produces upsets, at least in the NBA. But is that good or bad for basketball? The NBA playoffs is actually designed for the best team to come out on top. However, the NFL and MLB playoffs, they're designed to do the same thing, but due to the small difference in talent between opponents in those sports, their playoff brackets are really just unpredictable. At the end of the day, I just want to see a year in the NBA where it is not clear who will win or even make the finals at the beginning of the year, and especially at the beginning of the playoffs. Watching the Celtics without their 2 best players make a deep playoff run and almost make the NBA Finals was just so much fun to watch last year. Now, there doesn't need to be a Cinderella story every single playoffs, but knowing that any team can win a 7-game series if they execute at the highest level would be amazing for the NBA. In conclusion, the NBA, they just need to find a way to balance out their teams. Imagine if the Warriors just didn't exist. There would be a great debate between the Celtics, 76ers, Raptors, Rockets, Lakers, Spurs, and plenty of other teams as to who would win the NBA championship. However, because the Warriors do exist, we don't get to have that debate, because there is a 99% chance that Golden State's just going to go home with the championship trophy at the end of the year. And the longer the Warriors continue on their dominating run, the faster the NBA will lose its fans. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this edition of Courtside. Join me next time where I will discuss more things that don't make sense, do more sports theory, and do a complete NBA season preview. And make sure to check out the Courtside Pod on Twitter if you have not done so already. I will make sure to link it in the podcast description. Signing off, this is Andrew Cohen. I will see you next time.